Hello, everyone. So, on the journey to recovering from anxiety, we've all got to understand at some point sensitization, and it still bewilders a lot of people. It seems like 1 minute I was fine, and suddenly I'm in the anxiety state. So, what is sensitization that Claire Weeks always talks about? How do I get into this state of nervous system sensitization? Why does it feel so odd and seemingly creep up on me? Why is it that 1 minute I was fine, the next minute I'm not, and how does it leave me in the anxiety state? So, if we understand this, it helps us recover. If we remain bewildered, which is also what Claire Weeks talks about, we don't really understand sensitization. We stay bewildered. And any tools that we use to try and recover can really fall flat because we're still trying to work it all out. How did I get in this situation in the first place? The good news is it's actually very simple. Sensitization is caused by the gradual rising of your stress temperature that goes unchecked over a lifetime. That's all it is. So the rising of your stress temperature, as you can see on screen, I'm getting fancy with my stress temperature model, which I created for workplaces. But effectively, it results in the nervous tension in your system, which represents your stress temperature rising to a point at which you become sensitized. So that's what I'm going to talk about using this metaphor of the stress temperature, because again, if you can see it visually, you can understand it. Hopefully, by the end, if you don't know already, you can go, okay, I get it now. I get how I got into this state, or at least I understand it a bit more. So then you can practice with more confidence the other tools, methods I described to get out of it, to get out of this red zone that I'm going to talk about and get back closer to green, because that's what it's all about. So your stress temperature, again, it's just a metaphor. If I could plug any anxiety sufferer into some sort of thermometer to get some objective data on their stress temperature, it would register high. The nervous system would register, or the nervous tension would be high. So again, your stress temperature is the amount of nervous tension in your system. We all get nervous tension, suffering or no suffering. It goes up and down, day in, day out, week in, week out. But we're often not aware of it. We don't know. Prior to my experience of my first panic attack, I thought I was fine because my nervous tension, as in my stress temperature, was rising throughout my life and I didn't know about it. So when it hit me, when I had my first panic attack, I was bewildered, as Claire Weeks talks about. I had no idea what was going on because I didn't understand any of what I'm talking about in this video. So again, as I talk through the model, just have a think about your own experience, your own stress, nervous tension experience that's risen throughout your lifetime, just so you can make sense of it. And again, we all experience nervous tension. No one's immune from it because life is stressful at different times. But the goal really is to get as close to green as we can. So close to what I call mindful living. We hear about mindfulness all the time, but that's essentially where we're not anxious. We're not worrying about tomorrow. We're not going through all the what ifs. We're not going over all the things that happened in the past, ruminating, regrets, all that sort of stuff. We're very much able to rest easy in the present moment, be peaceful, enjoy life. Now, a lot of us may have been there at some point, but we're very far away if we're in the anxiety state, and that may be you as you're watching this, and that's okay. You know, we can talk about how we get back there. But you know, it would be nice to be there, of course, all the time. But even if you don't have anxiety, life stuff happens. You've got a family, you're working, stressful things happen. We lose jobs, we get a poor mark on our exams, we have some family dramas, friendship dramas, whatever it might be. So there's a lot going on. And so the nervous tension rises, so our stress temperature is getting a little bit hotter. So we might move into yellow zone, which is what I call busy but well. So lots going on. Maybe you're sleeping okay, you're going to the gym, you've got some good support networks. You can download with a friend around challenges and they can help you reframe them. So you've got enough outlets for the inevitable stress that's building in your life. The challenge is, of course, often we don't know about all the stress we've experienced. We don't know what's registered in our system. And so the stress continues to build. And so that busy but well or good stress turns into, problematic stress. We start to push through at work. We start to do more. We start to maybe push away difficult feelings. We start to repress difficult emotions and start to charge through life. We start to try and control the stuff around us in order to get through life. And that's when we kind of move into that sort of yellow to orange zone, the stress zone. Of course, if that goes unchecked, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail, we hit a point of anxiety where there's so much tension in our system, the stress temperature is rising to a point where we're constantly worried about tomorrow, constantly going over the past, and we may not be even aware of this at all. So we may not even realize we're in the anxiety state because we're still coping okay. We're still living life. We've still got holding it down our jobs, raising a family, studying, whatever it might be. I talk about the end point for some of this is we burn out. So we have a more dramatic burnout, which happened to me, completely physically and mentally exhausted because we've been trying to cope with this levels of sensitization, this rising stress temperature for so many years. And all that happens is that you get highly sensitized when you're burnt out, extreme symptoms, which is a shock, which is why often people get really shocked when they burn out because they have no idea what's going on. And then they can kind of hit depletion mode because they've been hyper vigilant for so long. So that's kind of the stress temperature model. Now, when we think about anxiety or life stresses, so life stress builds. So stuff happens at school, stuff happens when we were kids. We might be witness a car accident. We might have difficult parents. We might have difficult relationships in a stressful culture, family situation. Doesn't really matter what. We've all experienced stressful events. Now, whether we have anxiety or not, the trick is if we have these difficult events, difficult experiences, if we want to stay in green or closer to green zone, we process these events. We get good support. We understand what happened at school. We realize it wasn't our fault. We were only doing our best. We were able to process what happened with our parents who maybe weren't as loving as they could have been. It doesn't really matter what the stresses are. We realize that we don't need to put so much pressure on ourselves to achieve all the time at school, at university, in our trade, in our profession, whatever it might be. So we're getting perspective, we're regularly getting perspective on the stresses, processing them, allow the energy behind the stress, so the adrenaline and the cortisol, to process, come up, we deal with it, and then we allow the nervous system to go back into rest and digest. So our stress temperature drops again because we're taking proactive action to do it. And that's how we stay balanced through all these, we exercise regularly, we might meditate, we eat well, we take regular breaks, we don't do overtime all the time. So we've got really good habits that help us stay in green zone. Now, we still, even if we get to the state of anxiety, we may have some good habits, but they're not necessarily enough to keep us in green zone. So that explains why a lot of people never get into the anxiety state because they're dealing and processing the inevitable stresses that we all face, because maybe they're lucky they had good support around them, they learnt the right way, they were exposed to less stressors, so they could deal with them. That was easy to deal with them because it was just simply less of them. They weren't as intense or severe, so they were more easily able to get perspective, process the energy, and go back into rest and digest. And they're often unconscious. We just take a break. Our parents go, take some time off, do this, do that. We've got good friends around us, whatever it might be. So this is not about doing it right or wrong. This is about understanding the process. So that's the rest and digest zone as I talk about green zone. I've talked before about busy but well zone being good stress. So it's okay to have some tension in the system. A lot of you will know that you've had tension, energy in the system called eustress or good stress. We can get stuff done. We can power through work. We can get organized on the family front. Not a problem. The problem is if we're not recognizing the point at which good stress starts to turn into problematic stress. And so we start to push through. We get headaches, tension headaches. We feel tired, a bit irritable, and we have chocolate, caffeine, we, go to our escapes a bit more, drink a bit too much booze to cope with the life stressors. We're not realizing what's happening. And so that's where we start, the sensitization process starts to increase because the life stresses build. So the life stress build and it's not processed or dealt with. Maybe we encounter some traumatic events, big traumas, little traumas, whatever we want to talk about or call them. And so we're not aware. And so we kind of then start to repress the difficult feelings and emotions that come with it. We try and contain it and control it. That stuff that happened to me at school, I didn't understand. I blame myself, but it was difficult. I don't want to face that again. So we repress difficult emotions. Maybe we didn't have someone to talk about it with. So all we can do is, be more hyper vigilant so that we don't face these difficult challenges again, which of course is impossible because there's always going to be challenges. So we go into control mode. All right, I'm going to control everything so I don't face that difficult situation. And again, and a lot of this is unconscious. We don't know that that's what we're doing. We think this is just normal. We think everyone else is perhaps doing it. So the life stresses build. And when we're not processing, allowing the energy cycles behind the stresses to process through our system to be dealt with, then this leads to nervous system sensitization that Claire Weeks talks about. So the stress temperature is rising, you're out of yellow, orange, and into red zone, which is where the cumulative stress through the rising of your stress temperature tips the nervous system into sensitization. It goes into hypervigilance mode. It gets tired of having to control everything, to be on alert, to look out for danger, whatever it might be. And that's when we hit sensitization. Problem with anxiety is that we don't always realize we're sensitized because it happens gradually. So we might maybe on reflection notice that we were more hypervigilant. We were unable to rest easy. Our sleep was getting affected. We were constantly worrying, but we're still coping. So we can still be sensitized and cope with life reasonably well until we can't. And that's what happens with this, what I call the pressure cooker erupts. So there's kind of like this tipping point. Maybe we had some experiences of anxiety. We were able to clamp back down on the anxiety pressure cooker, as I talk about in another video. So we're trying to contain the stress temperature that's rising without really knowing it. We maybe get a few flashes of anxiety or panic at times until the point where the nervous system gets tired. It's tired of being in this hypervigilance mode, that the panic comes up. That energy that we've been trying to repress and control pushes the metaphorical lid off the pressure cooker, comes up, and you kind of hit a tipping point, and it's a shock. I remember when I had my first panic attack, I had no idea what was going on because it was so intense. And my coping, pushing away control tools weren't working. And I was at this extreme fear. And I was just sitting at my desk at work. Heart was racing. And this is what Claire Weeks talks about being bewildered. 1 minute I was fine, even though I was sensitized and didn't realize it. But all these coping, repression, pushing away strategies stopped working. And so the lid came off, was almost blown off the pressure cooker. And all that was happening, the adrenaline, the cortisol was finally being released. But it's a flight or fight response, remember, being activated. And so I'm reacting to just sitting at my desk as though there's something dreadful's going to happen because my body's screaming at me that there is. And that's why it's so bewildering. That's why we think we're going crazy. We have fear of dying. We don't know what's going on because our body's reacting as though there's a tiger right in front of us, yet we know there isn't. And so this is the kind of the line, almost the tipping point where we get bewildered. And it's simply because that pressure cooker, the stress temperatures put so much pressure on our containment lid that it gets blown off. And it's such a shock. We go, what on earth is going on? And so that's what happens. So that's all that happens with sensitization and your stress temperature reflected in the amount of nervous tension. The nervous tension rises, the stress temperature rises to a point where you're hitting red zone and we're sensitized without really knowing it. And that's all that's happening. Just a tired nervous system that's sick of having to control, repress, cope with all this stress that's accumulated over the years. So I hope that makes sense. Because all my videos, really, once you realize you're in this state, about how to get back closer to green, how do you start to desensitize and get back closer to rest and digest mode? And so when Claire Weeks talks about, and I'll just move my graphic, facing, accepting, floating, this is what we start to do. Once we make sense of it through this video, for example, we make sense of it, we can start to implement the tools of acceptance, allowance. We can take some of the fear out of the bewilderment away, so we can start to practice that blue arrow that's on screen to start to go, allow this tension, the thoughts, the symptoms to do what they need to do. As our stress temperature drops back to a more manageable level, the desensitization process occurs. The more we allow, go loose, maybe think about our habits, how much we're working, all those basic things, supportive tools as well, of course. But how do we allow, go loose, allow the panic, those sensations, so that we can get closer to green? So a lot of my videos deal with how you practice. So if you're new to this, the Anxiety Cure video series explains all this, and supported by this graphic, hopefully will give you more understanding. And so please familiarize yourself with that. The floating technique, the live practice, which I talk about a lot, which clients find useful, is all about what you do in the blue and then eventually the green to desensitize, and get you back closer to the green zone, where we can feel happier, where peace arises, we can feel joy again, all that sort of stuff. And that's what recovery is all about. But in order to recover, you've got to understand this, because many people don't understand it. It's not talked about in the profession. So hopefully, with this metaphor of the stress temperature, you get a better handle of sensitization, how it happens, and what you can start to do about it as a result. If you've got any questions, as always, please let me know. But I hope to see you again very soon. So take care.